Got him, finally. Okay, so we're gonna get started on rule one. Rule one is the game, player conduct and rules. This is gonna introduce some basic concepts about the game. And you're gonna hear, you might hear this phrase a lot, that the purpose of the golf is a game where you play the course as you find it, and you play your ball as it lies. And you play by the rules and in the spirit of the game, which involves good attitude and good conduct towards the course and towards the other players. Players are responsible for applying their own penalties, and they are responsible for also knowing the rules and when to and how to apply the penalty. Now, of course, there are situations where player would get relief from situations, so it's not always play the course as you find it. There are situations where players are entitled to release, say, from abnormal ground and abnormal course conditions, etc. So 1.2 talks about standards of player conduct, and there's some examples in here on how to show consideration to the course and to others. It talks about you should check to see whether the committee has adopted a code of conduct. And the GAM hard card does have a code of conduct section, and it talks about we follow procedure 5H, which allows the players in violation of policy may be penalized or disqualified. Penalties are usually what we would more than likely do, have a step-up procedure for a player that may be in violation of code of conduct. But again, it depends on the kind of breach of code of conduct. There may be a code of conduct serious breach where we would want to immediately disqualify our player. Again, but we talked about communication as a team for our tournament days. When you're out there as part of a team, this, of course, would fall into that category where we would not want to start applying code of conduct penalties without notifying the official in charge, the OIC, the GAM person. And we'd want to notify, if you do observe a code of conduct, which you feel to be a code of conduct violation, it's a good point. It's always a good point to get on the radio and announce the player in the group of what you've observed and bring that point of discussion to the entire team. So everyone else for the day will be aware of that player and can kind of watch out to see whether there are any escalations of conduct problems, or someone may need to want to go over and talk to that player and issue a warning. Talk about penalties are meant to cancel out any potential advantage.
Craig?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Excuse me. The other part, I think the other part of that situation is that referees are not to take abuse either. And so it's not just observing bad behavior on the golf course, it's making sure that the referee speaks up to the rover or to the official in charge if someone is abusing them as well.
Yeah, certainly poor conduct directed to a referee could certainly generate a penalty for that player, severity of which would depend on the kind of conduct a player, what kind of bad conduct the player has. We had situations in the past, especially you might face this with inclement weather. Sometimes we'll be playing a qualifier or a tournament that we have to get in. Conditions are not ideal. However, the course is still playable. There are no imminent risk of bad weather in terms of lightning or other such bad weather where play would be called immediately. So we would tend to more than likely continue play as long as the course is playable. Players, depending upon how, what kind of attitude they have and how they're playing that day, may get in your face a little bit for discussions on why we are not stopping play. You can tell them you talk to the OIC, or you can call it in. You tell them you'll talk to the staff, and tell them you may want to get back to them and tell them what our plans are, and try to explain why we're playing or what the plans might be.
Yeah, if you remember, Craig, we had that issue up at the amateur a couple of years ago at Boeing.
Yes, we sure did, and it was there was some unhappy players.
Yep.
Good Boeing that year. Thanks. Get over here to. Okay, I think we're going to go to any other questions on Rule 1? There is an interpretation I want to go over. For those of you who have the big book, I want to look at 1.3b 1/2. We talked about how the playing by the rules, players are responsible for complying with all terms of the competition, as well as knowing the rules. And they're also responsible for applying the rules. So they're expected to recognize when they've breached a rule, and to be honest in applying their own penalties. I've never had an experience where a player has knowingly breached a rule and deliberately not applied it. But if that case ever were to arise, that player would be disqualified. Also, if 2 or more players agree to ignore a rule that they know applies, they are also disqualified, even if they have not yet acted on the agreement. So, and I think if you find out if they've even agreed to do that before the round starts, there is they cannot back out of that agreement. They're going to be disqualified if they've entered that agreement before the round even starts. So 1.3b 1/2 talks about, in order to agree to ignore a rule or penalty, players must be aware that the rule exists.
Hey, Craig,
Yes, yes.
you're in the players edition of the rules. Okay, no, now you're in the full ones. Okay.
Here we go. I'm trying to maneuver this thing here. Here we are. Everybody see that? So we talked about ignoring the rules. If it does not apply, if there's no penalty, if the players agree to waive a rule that they are not aware of, or fail to apply a penalty that they do not know exist. Examples might be in match play, 2 players agree in advance to concede all putts within a specific length, but are unaware that the rules prohibit them from doing that. Before a 36-hole match, 2 players agree that they only play 18 holes, and whoever is behind at that point will concede the match, not knowing that that does not comply with the terms of the competition. So there are situations where players might get a waiver from this penalty if they do not know a rule exists, which I find interesting, because here we are telling the players that they're supposed to know the rules, and yet we're giving them a waiver on ignoring a rule that they don't know exists. So go figure that out. Trying to get out of it. How do I, here we are.
I can't hear you.
Over there.
Sorry for the maneuvering problems here. The in paragraph 2 here, it talks about as a referee, you need to accept players' reasonable judgment on maybe where the ball last crossed the edge of a penalty area, estimating or measuring where when dropping or placing the ball and taking relief, or especially when replacing the ball on its original spot, when the spot is known or estimated. Typically, if you do not have you may have a reasonable idea where the ball last crossed the edge of a penalty area, and players may take it upon themselves to determine that. If you are reasonably certain where that area is, then you need to stick with your decision. If not, if you're going to rely on the player's reasonable judgment, I would always double check with the players' playing partners, or the players in that group, to make sure they concur with that player's reasonable judgment, to make sure that you have a agreement with the entire group on where that player is going to take relief from, where that, for example, where that player ball last crossed the edge of a penalty area. So a penalty applies from his own actions or from the actions of his caddy. You want to look up the definition of a caddy. You can look at that later. It gives the caddy definition, and there's a whole section later on where we talk about caddy and advice. And that'll be in rule, I think that's rule 10. Levels of penalties. There's a one-stroke penalty, of course. And a one-stroke penalty applies both in match play and stroke play under certain rules. And it's usually a minor procedural problem, maybe on how the player dropped the ball, as long as the ball stayed in the relief area. Player dropped the ball improperly, it's going to be a one-stroke penalty. General penalty going to be a two-stroke penalty in stroke play. In match play, it's going to be a loss of hole penalty. And for serious breaches where a player may not correct, say playing from the wrong place, if it's a serious breach, if that's not corrected in time, that's going to be, if the player tees off from the next hole, player is going to be disqualified from the competition. And as a referee and as a committee, as our conduct as GAM, we have no discretion to vary the penalties. They are to be applied as provided by the rules. There's a whole section on applying penalties to multiple breaches of the rules. We'll scroll down through here. If a player breaches multiple rules or the same rule multiple times before an intervening event happens, such as making a stroke or becoming aware of the breach, the penalty that applies depends on what the player did. This is going to be typically something that is going to require discussion with the OIC or the rover, because these can be somewhat confusing and difficult on how to treat. When the breaches result from unrelated acts, the player is going to get a separate penalty for each breach. For example, say you've got a player in a bunker and the player is making practice stroke, makes a practice stroke by grounding his club, by touching the sand. Okay, that's going to get that player a general penalty. And then after the player realizes he's got some, say he's got some footprints in his line of play further up along on his line of play towards the edge of the bunker, he grabs the rake and walks up there and rakes those footprints because he wants to improve his line of play. That's going to be an unrelated act, and the player is going to get a separate penalty for that action. And when breaches resulted from a single act or related acts, the player gets only one penalty. But if the act or acts breach multiple rules involving different penalties, the higher level penalty applies. For example, when you get multiple procedural penalties, such as the requirements for marking and lifting, cleaning and dropping, or replacing a ball, where the penalty is one stroke, such as both lifting the ball without marking its spot and cleaning the lifted ball when not allowed, the player is going to get one penalty stroke for even if a player, takes all those actions, such as before it doesn't mark it, he cleans it, and he's only get the one. He's going to only get the one penalty stroke. If the player incorrectly substitutes a ball from a wrong place in stroke play, the player plays a substituted ball when not allowed in breach of Rule 6.3b and also plays the ball from a wrong place in breach of Rule 14.7a. The player gets 2 penalty strokes in total. You're going to see that later on too. A lot of times players will accidentally move the ball in the general area and they fail to replace it. So there is an interpretation regarding that. The player has accidentally moved the ball, that's one stroke, and the player, he or she, has played from a wrong place. That's going to be a 2-stroke penalty. But in that instance, the player is only going to get the 2-stroke penalty. In a combined procedural and substitution wrong place breaches, in stroke play, a single act or related acts breach one or more procedural requirements where the penalty is 1 stroke, and the breach of one or both of the rules against playing incorrectly is, say, wrong place, the player gets a 2-stroke penalty. That is, I make this smaller down here anyway. I make this smaller. This area here.
This.
That's all right. I'm gonna minimize this. So any questions on C penalties, 1.3C? 4 we talked about. There's a lot of good examples in Rule 1 in your big book, or you can go to the interpretations for Rule 1. If you scroll down through, you'll see a lot of good interpretations that talk about 1.3C, the actions, the interpretations related to that. 1.3C, actions of another person, intervening events between players. So you can take your time and go through the examples of 1.3C, talking about multiple breaches, and there's examples of unrelated acts. For example, if a player talked about a single action multiple times, a player in a bunker taking multiple practice swings, grounding his club each time, would be considered multiple actions of a single breach. So that'd be considered one general penalty.
Craig, that's what the USG always calls the quantity discount?
Yeah, the quantity discount. Any questions on 1 and 3? I think we've covered Rule 1. We're going to jump to Rule 2, the course. The course talk, and there's a definition of the course. There are five. It's funny, it's not,
Okay,
On the course from last year.
yeah, well, I'm
I
fine.
don't like doing this thing.
The rehearsal,
You can.
rules haven't changed.
Huh?
So you could control that.
Here's the definition of the course. The entire area of playing within the edge of any boundary set by the committee. All areas inside the boundary edge are in bounds and part of the course. All areas outside the boundary edge are out of bounds and not part of the course. The boundary edge extends both up above the ground and down below the ground. The course is made up of 5 defined areas. We're going to go through the definition of each of those 5 areas. The biggest area of the course is the general area. And here's the definition for that. It's the area of the course that covers all the course except for the 4 other defined areas, and those are called specific areas. It's the teen area that the player must play from in starting the hole he or she is playing. All penalty areas, all bunkers, and the putting green of the hole the player is playing. Okay. The general area includes all teen locations on the course other than the teen area and the all wrong greens. And remember, we talked about teen area. It's that specific area that is defined by the committee. And it only extends the front edge of the marker and the side edges of the marker and back 2 club lengths. So the teen area, people might be confused thinking the teen area is that entire tee pad, but it's just that rectangle defined by the 2 club lengths depth where the tee markers define it. So that's the definition of the teen area. The next specific area of the course I want to go to is the penalty area. This is an area from which relief with a 1-stroke penalty is allowed if a player's balls come to rest there. A penalty area is any body of water on the course, whether or not marked by the committee, including a sea, lake, pond, river ditch, surface drainage ditch, or other open water course, even if not containing water. So this is an important definition to know because there may be situations on the course that do not contain water, but a surface drainage ditch would be considered a penalty area. And by default, if the course does not mark the, I think it says here later on, it's not, yeah, it's down here. If the color of the penalty area has not been marked by the committee, it is treated as a red penalty area. So any other part of the course the committee defines as a penalty area. Now the committee can define other areas as a penalty area. You'll see a lot of courses have defined penalty areas now that we would not normally have seen. The new rules allow for that because it does not necessarily have to contain water anymore. So a penalty area is one of the defined areas of the course, and there are 2 different types of penalty areas distinguished by the color used to mark them. GAM uses stakes to mark and identify penalty areas. Yellow penalty areas are marked with yellow lines or yellow stakes. We will generally have both the stakes identify it and the lines define it. So if the ball is touching the line or even over, because the penalty area extends upward, even if a ball is overhanging the yellow line, it is considered to be in a penalty area, which under today's rules is not usually a big problem anyway, because there's a lot more liberty in playing balls in the penalty area now that under the rules change in 2019. So relief, yellow penalty areas give the players 2 options, relief options. In addition to playing the ball as it lies, the player has 2 relief options. It's back on the line relief or stroke and distance, and those are going to be covered under Rule 17 in more detail. The red penalty areas are marked with red lines or red stakes, and generally GAM will do both. Red stakes identify and red lines define it. It gives the player an extra lateral relief options, which is the 2 club length options from where the penalty or the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area. In addition to the 2 relief options provided for the yellow penalty areas. And some of you may recall that back in the day, there used to be opposite margin relief option under the standard rules. That is no longer available under the standard rules. If that option were to be available, it would have to be done as a local rule, and it would be listed under the first page on the notice to competitors. We would have to identify the hole and because we would probably do it for a particular hole where we would provide relief for opposite margin relief. And I think the junior tournament had that option available to them at the TPC. If the color, as I said, if the color has not been marked, it's going to by default be a red penalty area. So, and again, the edge of the penalty area extends both above the ground and down below the ground. So this means that any ground, all ground, such as any natural or artificial object inside the edge of the penalty area is going to be treated as being in the penalty area, such as a bridge. A bridge inside of a red penalty area is going to be treated as a bridge, in the penalty area, and the player would not get relief from that obstruction within the penalty area. Now, if the ball is outside the penalty area, and if the ball lying outside the penalty area player is impeded, has an impeded swing from an obstruction within the penalty area, the player would be entitled to relief from that obstruction.
On number
Because the ball lies outside the penalty area.
15. The lines usually go up to the bridge.
Pardon me?
So is the bridge included?
Can you get closer to the mic? I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. Is the bridge part of the bridge is part of the bridge is considered to be in the penalty area, but it's still considered to be an obstruction. For example, if a player's ball lies on the bridge, of course, the player can ground the ball in a penalty area anyway, but nowadays it doesn't make any difference. The player is allowed to ground his club, on the bridge. Does that answer your question?
But there's still no relief, right, Craig? There's no relief from the bridge if it's in the penalty. You either play it from there or take penalty.
Craig,
I'm talking about if the ball is outside the penalty area, you would get relief if your swing is impeded by the bridge. But if the ball lies inside the penalty area, there's no relief for an obstruction that lies within the penalty area.
And I think the question is, if the ball is on the bridge, you're in the penalty area and there's no relief.
Correct. So we talked about how edges of the penalty area should be defined by stakes or lines. We generally do both. When defined by stakes.
Craig, the other question that sometimes comes up is these sprinkler control boxes are in a penalty area, and players will ask relief from a sprinkler control box if their ball is impeded by the sprinkler control box in the penalty area and their ball is in the penalty area.
And again, the answer would be because any obstruction within the penalty area, and if your ball lies within the penalty area, there's not going to be relief for any obstruction. Now, I would raise one point about, we'll get a lot of questions, players asking relief for line of play, and this will be covered later on, but I may as well mention it. If a ball lies outside the penalty area and the player does not have any interference, his line of play is not interfered with, his lie of the ball, his stance or swing is not interfered with by the bridge, the player may ask for relief because the bridge is in front of his line. In that case, we do GAM, in the rules of golf, there's no relief for line of play.
Except for TIO.
except for TIO. TIOs are treated differently, correct?
That's a local rule.
TIOs would have to be, that's a local rule that would have to be in place for a particular course. Sometimes we will, you'll see sometimes courses will define a penalty area by physical features, such as a beach, or maybe when the high grass starts. You'll get that a lot in, if you referee a high school regional or match, high school tournament. They can't mark everything. They will define a penalty area by the physical features. Generally, GAM will not do that. We talked about it when an edge of the body water is not defined by the committee, the edge of that penalty area is defined by its natural boundaries, where the ground slopes down to form the depression to hold the water. Okay, the next definition we want to cover is bunker. So a bunker is a specially prepared area of sand, which is often hollow, from which turf or soil is removed. And it lists specifically, these are not part of a bunker. A lip, wall, or face at the edge of the prepared area consisting of soil, grass, stacked turf, or artificial materials. So if you've got a face of a bunker that's stacked with sod, that's not going to be considered part of the bunker. And if you embed the ball in there, you may have a real problem getting free relief, as Lee Jewett will tell you. Also not part of the bunker is any soil or growing or attached natural object inside the edge of the prepared area, such as grass, bushes, or trees. Sometimes you'll see a little island of grass within a bunker. That is not part of the bunker. If the ball lies on that grass, it's not going to be considered in the bunker, and the player plays it as can ground his club, etc. Do any the ball that would be considered to be in the general area, and the player can play the ball as such. Okay, not part of the bunker also is any sand that is spilled over and is outside the edge of the prepared area. And all other areas of sand on the course that are not inside the edge of a prepared area, such as deserts and other natural sandy areas, or areas sometimes referred to as waste areas. We generally do not play many courses with waste areas. We have had some, you may, as a matter of fact, the Michigan Amateur at Eagle Eye, the last time we played there, we did have 2 bunkers that were declared as waste areas. And I'm not sure if we'll do that again this year or not, but that's something to keep in mind, that waste areas are not part of a bunker, are not bunkers, and players it'd be considered a general area. Players can treat their stroke as such. So bunkers are considered, it's one of the 5 defined areas of the course.
Right.
There's someone here?
We have someone in the chat, JW. We have some brand new officials on the line, so if we can try not to abbreviate, that'd be appreciated.
Abbreviate what?
Like
The what?
TIO, for example.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just saying what the chat says.
You mentioned TIO. It's if you go back and look in the local rules, you'll see a rules regarding that, temporary movable obstructions, which we do not generally have. It's not an easy local rule to try to interpret. So I suggest if you want to take a look at it, it may generate a lot of questions. Feel free to call me or call someone in the GAM to get a better explanation on how that would work.
Craig,
Try not to use too much abbreviations here.
Craig, you usually see that on the PGA Tour more than anywhere, right? With
Yeah,
grandstands and certain tents and things of that nature.
Yeah, if you watch a PGA tournaments on TV, you're gonna see a lot of TIOs. And you'll see how they determine relief. They may not go through the entire process. Sometimes it looks like you get 2 club lengths from a TIO, but in essence, it's the way they define how to find relief from a TIO. You're getting one club length is considered to be within the alley of the TIO. So you find the outer edge of that, and then you get 1 club length from that outer edge of that alley. That's kind of how you'll see. It's kind of how you'll see the players sometimes taking 2 club lengths when really they're getting relief from a TIO. That's kind of my summary of how a TIO relief works.
TIO is temporary.
And TIO is temporary movable obstruction again.
Hey, Craig, if I
Yeah.
saw
Yes, sir.
temporary immovable obstruction in the rules, I would be checking out exactly what to do because we just don't have that much experience with them. So, no, you don't need to worry about it unless you see it on.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about it, and you'd want to call someone over to make sure you do it right. Okay, the putting green is another specific, the 5th and final part of the 4th specific area and the 5th and final part of the course we're going to talk about. So putting green is the area of the course the player is playing that is especially prepared for putting. And it's just for that hole. Any other specially prepared area for putting would be considered a wrong green, and the players would need to be able to take relief from wrong greens. The committee has defined the putting green such as when a temporary green is used. If I don't understand what that means. Okay, the putting green for a hole contains the hole which the player tries to play the ball. There's a definition of the hole. It defines the hole and the size of the hole, in case you're interested in that. The putting green is one of the 5 defined areas of the course. The putting greens for all other holes, which the player is not playing at the time, are wrong greens and part of the general area. And there's a penalty for playing from a wrong green. Players must take relief from wrong greens. You will see we've had some tournaments where we have courses where the layout or the layout of the putting green is such where, depending on where the hole is located, the player, if a ball is in a certain other part of the green, portion of the green, the player if a player wants to play directly towards the hole, may want to chip the ball, and the course superintendent probably would not be very happy with GAM if we allow that. So sometimes we will set up a wrong green portion on the putting green the player is playing. So in other words, the putting green the player is playing could have a portion of it be declared as a wrong green for which the player would have to take relief. And we would identify that in the local rules with probably 2 flags on either side of the green, and with the line between those flags being defined as the area of wrong green. So you need to be aware that that potentially could happen on certain courses. It definitely happens at the U of M course.
Yes.
The edge of the putting green is defined where it can be seen at a specifically prepared area starts, such as where the grass has been distinctly outcut to show the edge, unless the committee defines the edge in a different way, such as by using a line or dots. If a double green is used for 2 different holes, the entire prepared area containing both holes is treated as a putting green when playing each hole. And here again, the committee may define an edge that divides the double green into 2 different putting greens. So we could have, again, a wrong green in that case as well. As a referee, you will be asked sometimes to go up and check to see whether a ball is on the green or off the green, because the player would like to lift his ball and mark it and clean it. Well, the putting green edge does not extend upward. The boundary does not extend upward. So the ball has to be touching the green in order to be considered on the putting green. So you may have to distinguish whether the ball is touching or not, and advise the player whether or not his or her ball is on the putting green or off the putting green, okay? Any questions on the 5 areas of the course?
Craig, I would just make, part of the general area is both the fairway and the rough. So, in taking drops, sometimes your drop may be able to put you into the fairway. And again, it may only keep you into the rough. But in certain times, you can go back and forth because that's just the general area. Right? Sometimes we get confused on rough versus the fairway. It's all general area.
Very good point, Dan. You'll find that when we talk about taking relief options for different situations, for relief from, say, any relief for, say, an abnormal ground condition or relief for unplayable ball. It'll tell you where the player can take relief into what area. And as long as, say, for example, a lot of times if the ball lies in the general area and you are able to take relief from a certain condition, if one club length or two club lengths allows you relief area to go into the fairway, the player is certainly entitled to do that as part of their taking relief. So we'll cover that more under the various rules. We're talking about where relief options are available and what areas of the course the players may take relief into. Trying to get out, let's see here, we're back in the course. So that covers the 5 defined areas of the course. It talks about, there's a picture diagram here. A ball can only be in one area of the course. And it's treated as being, if the ball is in 2 specific areas, in other words, it can be treated only as lying in one area that comes first in this order. Penalty, if it's not in the general area, it'll be treated as coming into the penalty area first, then bunker, then putting green. Okay, if the ball is in 2 specific areas of the course, it's treated as in that order: penalty area, bunker, then putting green. And I don't foresee ever having to determine that, but I don't know why I guess that in some courses that may be a situation you run into.
We do have one on the Moore course like that.
Okay. Where you've got, which 2 areas that you have like that?
On, let's see, 10, 11, I think it's 12, the dog leg on the backside on the Moore. There's water on the left. There's that great big sand trap bunker, right? But the line runs through the bunker. But your ball could be in the bunker and in the water as well, in the penalty area.
Okay.
Right? At which point then, or if it's sitting on the line, right? Where is it? Is it in the penalty area or is it in the sand trap, in the bunker?
Okay, there you go. So you would go in that order then.
Right.
Penalty area first, then bunker, then putting green.
Right. So if it's sitting right on the line, then you can take a practice swing, right? Because it's in the red.
Right. If it's in the red, right, you're allowed to ground your club and take you can ground your club and take practice swings in the penalty area.
But it would have to be on the line.
It has to be on the line.
Yeah.
So there are certain rules that give free relief with no penalty from interference by certain defined objects or conditions, such as loose impediments in Rule 15. Movable obstructions are also in 15, and abnormal course conditions, which are defined as these 4 areas: animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, and temporary water. So let's go back to definitions again. Cover definitions on the 4 okay, animal hole is a hole dug in the ground by an animal, except for holes dug by animals that are also defined as loose impediments, such as worms or insects. So worms or insects are treated as differently, and there's different relief options for those anyway. So you're still gonna get relief for worm or insect types of debris that they cause. The term animal hole includes the loose material, the animal dug out of the hole, any worn down track or trail leading into the hole, and any area on the ground pushed up or altered as a result of the animal digging a hole in the ground, such as like a burrowing animal. You see you see where a mole track, that would be all considered part of an animal hole. Okay, now the next area of the talk about ground and repair. Ground under repair is any part of the course the committee defines to be ground under repair, whether by marking it or otherwise, because there are certain areas that by definition become ground under repair, even if not marked. So the ground inside edge of all ground inside the edge of the defined area is part of the ground under repair. And any grass, bush, tree, or other growing or attached natural object rooted in the defined area, including any part of those objects that extend up and above the ground outside the edge of a defined area, but not when such object is attached to or below the ground outside the edge of the defined area, such as a tree root that is part of the tree root rooted inside the edge. So what they're saying there, if you've got a tree inside of a ground under repair area and the tree branches extend out and beyond the edge of the ground under repair area, extended upward, if a player has interference from his swing or stance from that tree branch is considered to be part of the ground under repair, and the player is going to be entitled to free relief. Okay. Ground under repair also includes things that the committee does not mark or define, such as any hole made by the committee or maintenance staff in setting up the course, such as a hole where a stake has been removed, or the hole on a double green being used by the play of another hole, or the maintaining of the course, such as a hole made in removing turf, or a tree stump, or laying pipelines, but not including aeration holes. So if for example, a tree stump has been dug out and there's a noticeable depression in an area, that does not have to be defined as a ground under repair, because by definition, it will be ground under repair, and a player will be entitled to relief from that indentation in the ground where the tree stump was removed. Grass cuttings, leaves, and other material piled for later removal, but it's important to notice that we define materials that are defined for later removal, because you'll get players asking for relief from leaves and other materials piled. And if they're not designated to be removed later, they are not ground under repair, but they will be treated as loose impediments. And any natural materials that are piled for removal are also loose impediments. And any materials left on the course that are not intended to be removed are not ground under repair, because unless the committee defines them as such. So you'll see players that may be way off the fairway, and there's a pile of branches that have been piled there. If you're uncertain, I would not give the player relief. I would at least make sure you check with the official in charge, the OIC, and ask the OIC whether or not on hole 15, whether or not the debris piled on the left side of 16 fairway, into the woods, is it going to be intended to be removed later or not? And generally, I would think more than likely not. In a rare case, there might be, but you'd have to double check. Make sure you check with someone before you deny or approve free relief for a player in that situation.
Greg,
Yes, sir.
generally, I think it's a good idea if you're a trouble hole official and you get to your trouble hole a little bit early to check out the the hole and not only identify where the penalty area might be, but see if there are any potential unmarked ground under repair areas or bare spots in the rough, or as you said, sticks or leaves or whatever piled, whether they're for removal, and then talk to the rover first to make sure you clearly understand it and treat every player that goes through the same way.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's, again, we talked about that last week, how we get out to your hole early and check those kinds of things out to get a good understanding of the kind of relief situations you're going to encounter during your round.
Craig, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Must the player take relief from ground under repair?
No, it's good. It's a good question. Very good. Thanks for asking. The player has the option. He's ground under repair, abnormal ground conditions. The player has the option of playing the ball as it lies. He does not have to take relief. In some cases, it may be, the relief, the nearest point of relief may be an unfavorable place to play from. So the player may choose to play from an abnormal ground condition.
Unless the committee decides it's mandatory.
Well, we're going to talk about the next situation here is an area that the no play zone is another area, and it could be considered part of a no play zone can be defined as part of an abnormal course condition. But let's go through here, then I'll go back to the definition.
Hang on a minute, relative to Robert's question. If you're the rules official there, the referee, you want to make sure that a player doesn't pick up his ball first and then decide, oh no, I'm going to play it where it was before. Once he gets it into his hands, he's committed to taking relief. Not that there's any necessarily penalty, but he could be having to drop into a bad spot and be better off playing it from that ground under repair, right?
Well, he's not committed to take relief. He could take a one-stroke penalty and put the ball back down.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so if a player, when you approach a player that's looking for help, you may always want to suggest to the player, don't, before you do anything, don't pick up your ball. If you pick up your ball, your options could be out of your control, and now you're going to be at the discretion of what the referee is going to tell you what you can do. Some of your options may have been taken away by the player picking up his ball without firsthand checking with what options are available to him or her. So we talked about a no play zone, and it could be defined as part of an abnormal course condition, or it could be defined as part of a penalty area where play is not allowed. So in either case, if a ball lies in a no play zone, the player is not going to be allowed to play that ball as it lies, regardless. A player must take relief when his or her ball lies in the no play zone, or when a no play zone interferes with his or her area of intended stance or area of intended swing in playing the ball outside the play zone. So if the ball is outside the play zone, and say the no play zone has some high grass that extends upward into it, and the player's swing is impeded by that high grass, the player would be entitled to free relief. The ball lies in the general area in his case, and the player would not be penalized. He'd get free relief if his ball lies outside the penalty area. Now, however,
Craig,
there's a different situation for when a ball lies in the penalty area. And if the ball lies in the penalty area and the ball has interference from no play zone, the player must take, if the player could take free relief, but the player must drop the ball in the penalty area by finding the nearest point of relief.
Craig, sometimes flower beds are marked by blue stakes, and the course will tell you that's a no play zone, even though there's the potential to play it out of it.
Yeah, there's a, I thought there was a good write-up on where the. Well, here's the definition of the no play zone. It's a part of the course where the committee has prohibited play. It could be a flower bed like we more than often run into. The no play zone must be defined as part of either an abnormal course condition or a penalty area. The committee may also use no play zones for any such reason, such as protecting wildlife, animal habitats, environmentally sensitive areas. They may want to prevent damage to young trees, flower beds, turf nurseries. Or returfed areas, other planted areas, or protecting players from danger. Preserving the sites of historical or cultural interest. The committee should define the edge of a no play zone with line or stakes, and the line or stakes or the tops of those stakes should identify no play zones. We generally identify no play zones with blue stakes in our GAM notice to players. They have to be defined differently than regular abnormal course condition or penalty area that does not apply to a no play zone. So I've got two questions. A question to everyone. Charles has a question. Are unraked footprints or other unmaintained concerns in bunkers abnormal course conditions? Not unless there's a local rule in place that allows for conditions like that to repair. And normally we would not have that local rule in place. Yeah, under COVID rules, we allowed players to repair for live balls and footprints because there were not rakes out. Towards the latter part of last year, or even most of last year, the courses had rakes back out. So we were somewhat, I think it was like half and half where we would have a local rule in effect and other times not. But this year, I do not expect to have a local rule in effect for repair of footprints in bunkers. It's one of those bad situations. Player is not going to be happy about it. Trying to play out of a bunker with a footprint in it. But there is no relief for a ball lying in a bunker in a footprint unless we have a local rule in effect. Another question for everyone is how many stroke penalty if a player picks up a ball that is in GOR, then doesn't drop his or her ball outside the GOR? Okay, you can, and then in that case, drops the ball back in GOR. So in this case, I think I mentioned if a player picks up mistakenly his or her ball, intending to take relief from GOR and then decides the player does not want to proceed with that, the player is replacing the ball, and the player is going to have to he would place the ball in the spot where it was, and if not known clearly, the player would do his best estimation, his or her best estimation, where that ball laid, whatever. Where the ball laid, it'd be a one-stroke penalty. Thanks for those questions. Keep them coming. My monitor over here, Alex, is keeping me honest.
We do it in emails. Yeah.
But the question is, can you pick up your ball's in GUR? Let's say it's a 5-foot diameter circle. Can you pick up your ball in GUR and then walk over 2 feet and drop it still in the GUR without penalty?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Lee?
So if your ball is in a GUR that's, let's say, 5 feet in diameter,
Okay,
and a player pick up his or her ball, walk 2 feet over, still in the GUR, and drop it and play it without penalty.
no, if players decide to take relief from an abnormal ground condition, and we'll cover that later in Rule 16, where a player must take complete relief from that abnormal ground condition. You're probably familiar with the video last year that we played of Jordan Spieth taking relief from temporary water in a cart path. Because because Jordan Spieth had interference from two different abnormal ground conditions, he had relief from an immovable obstruction. I mean, he had interference from an immovable obstruction as well as temporary water. The player could choose as to which condition he wanted to take relief from. He doesn't have to take relief from, he can take relief from either one or the other. It's the player's choice. In Jordan's choice, he wanted to take relief from the temporary water. So he was with a rules official for quite a period of time, trying to find a spot where he could drop his ball, where he would get total relief from that temporary water. Now, in the case of the video, you saw there was a couple different little different pockets of water. Each of those different pockets of water would be treated as a different condition. He could take relief from one, and if he took relief from one, he may find himself interfered from the other one. Then he would he could take relief from the next one as well in the same fashion. But it's the player's choice. He does not have to take relief from both conditions.
But the issue, I think.
I'm sorry, the issue you had is, no, he cannot do that. He has to take total relief from that run to repair.
Unless the
Right.
ball lies in a dormer course condition in a bunker or putting green, then the player can take maximum available relief.
You'll see that when we talk about relief from temporary water and from water in bunkers and putting greens only. In some cases, there is not a situation where you're allowed it, where you can find total relief. So in that case, it's written into the rule where a player can take relief to the maximum relief available to him or her. In other words, he may still have interference from the temporary water, but in that case, if that's the point of relief with maximum relief available, the player can play from that point. Good point, Marv. Thanks. We didn't talk about immovable obstruction. That's another object you get relief from or can interfere with play. An immovable obstruction is any obstruction that cannot be moved without unreasonable effort or without damaging the obstruction of the course, and otherwise does not meet the defined definition of a movable obstruction. Cart paths are immovable obstructions. Birdhouses might be would be an immovable obstruction. Maintenance barns would be an immovable obstruction. Anything that definitely you cannot move without unreasonable effort, or other areas that the committee may define as immovable. Let's see here. So back to rule number 2.
Craig, can you address the questions on the chat?
We answered that one.
Robert has that, probably from there.
A no play zone can be defined as being in the penalty area. That's correct. It's, so no play zone can be defined as either abnormal ground condition or in a no play zone or in a penalty area, one or the other. Chris, if you asked, if you not take complete relief from a GUR, you have played from the wrong place. So that's correct. You would get a 2-stroke penalty for playing in the wrong place. That happened to Rory McIlroy on the tour. He was taking relief from the cart path, and he took relief, but his foot was still on the cart path, and I don't think he was aware of it. And then later on, he was imposed a 2-stroke penalty for playing from the wrong place. John asked, the ball in the general area, but stance in a no play zone, free relief is given, correct? Correct. No play zone, you need to take relief, stance, and interior and swing. So if your stance, live ball stance, or area of your intended swing, if there's interference from either of those three, you need to take free relief. And if the ball's in the general area, it's free relief. If the ball's in the penalty area, you get a free drop, but it's got to be within the penalty area. So if a ball, generally if the ball is in the no play zone within a penalty area, you must take relief under Rule 17. So again, if the ball is in the no play zone within a penalty area and the ball is in that no play zone within the penalty area, the player must take relief under Rule 17 with a one-stroke penalty.
Craig, what is the relief from an immovable obstruction?
You want the process of going through that?
Well, I'm just asking, for example, there's a halfway house on our golf course. If your ball is up against the halfway house, but it's in your line of flight also, what's the relief?
It's a good point. Let's go to the definition of nearest point of relief. And a lot of times the players will ask you to help them find that. So the reference point for taking free relief from any abnormal course condition, such as an immovable obstruction, or an animal condition, or a long green, or anything that requires to determine the nearest point of relief. It is the estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the ball's original spot, but not near the hole in that spot. It's going to be in the required area of the course. In other words, each condition that you are getting relief from will have defined areas that the player may drop a ball in. For example, in the case of temporary water, if your ball is in the general area, you're gonna need to find relief in the general area, and the ball must stay in that general area. If it hits in the general area and rolls outside of the general area, it needs to be redropped, and it needs to stay in that part of the course. Now, if you're taking temporary relief from a casual water on the putting green, that's a whole different situation. So it's important to know each rule has different areas of the course that the player may find the nearest point of relief. So it's where the condition does not interfere with the strokes the player would have made from the original spot if the condition was not there. A lot of times what you want to do is ask the player if that condition were not there, ask him which line of play would he choose,
Need some
he or her
help.
choose, and then you would walk that player to a point where on that line of play, the interference no longer exists, say with the halfway house or the maintenance barn.
Committee could also set up a drop zone.
Yeah, more often, yeah, a lot of times there'll be a drop zone. It'll be referenced on the notice to the players. Now, remember, and again, there is no relief for line of play. So if a player comes up to you and says, the maintenance barn, do I get relief from my line of play from that maintenance barn? The answer is definitely going to be no, there's no relief for line of play in the rules of golf. So in estimating the reference point, it requires a player to identify his choice of club, the stance, the swing, and line of play that he or she would have used for that stroke. So a lot of times I will ask the player to choose the club you would have used, and say a player is near a irrigation pod or whatever, those box, irrigation box. I would ask the player to just kind of step away slowly, making his swing until he no longer has interference from his swing or stance or lie ball. And then that's the nearest point. You would put a tee down at that nearest point, and then the player is going to be given another 1 club length relief area for his drop area. That's the 1 club length arc is going to be the relief area for the player's relief area, as long as it meets the condition of what part of the course the player has to drop in. The player does not need to simulate that stroke by taking stance and swing, but it's recommended the player normally do this to help make an accurate estimate. I mean, if it's clear to you where the nearest point of relief is, go ahead and make that player, put a tee down in that spot. And then the player can take his one stroke and find his relief area. The nearest point of complete relief relates solely to the particular condition from which relief is being taken and may be in a location where there is interference by something else. Like we talked about, a player take relief from one condition and then he has relief. He may take relief from another new condition. Player must take complete relief from each condition, except that the player may take relief from both conditions at the same time. What is that? Player may take relief from both conditions at the same time based on determining the nearest point of complete relief from both when having already taken relief separately from each one. In other words, you'll get a situation where players are ping-ponging back and forth between relief from a cart path and temporary water. At some point, you've got to say, okay, we're taking relief from both of them. Okay, we're at a stopping point right now.
Craig,
Okay, go ahead. Question?
one more thing, I guess, relative to Robert's question, to emphasize it, it's the nearest point of complete relief, not the nicest point. So whether you're taking relief from a cart path or, as you said, a halfway house, before the player picks up his ball, you might want to go through with them where the nearest point actually is going to be and make sure they're not dropping into a spot that's worse or as bad as the area that he might want to play it from.
That's a good point, Lee. Make sure the players know their options or know where they may end up going. It's especially true in cart path. There's a good picture in taking relief from a cart path. Later on in your book, you'll see it's going to be the nearest point, not always towards the side of the fairway. It could be into some high grass that the player would not want to drop into. So that's a good point.
Well, there's also situations where halfway houses are surrounded by hedges or trees or bushes or something, and you could be dropping, like you said, dropping into the middle of a bush or standing in the middle of a bush from your relief area.
Okay, well taken. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll be back at 11:21. I've got 11:16. Let's get back here at 11:21. So a lot to try to get through here. Thanks.
Craig, this is John Beecroft. How you doing?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Good, good. Craig, we have to get out of here. We're on our way over to Grand Rapids for a meeting this afternoon, so I'm going to beg off here, and we'll just go through our notes from last year. But we'll be here next Wednesday as well. Okay.
Okay, John, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for everything, man. See
Thank
you
you,
soon.
man. See
Bye-bye.
you soon. Bye. Bye, Madeline.
Yeah,
Okay, it's 11:21. We're gonna get restarted here. We're up to Rule 3, competition. Rule 3 covers the central elements of all golf competitions, either match or stroke play, and whether players are playing as individuals or with a partner as part of the side. And the scoring can be either by gross score with no handicapping or net scores where handicaps applied. Match play or stroke play, generally the rules are the same for each. In match play, a player and opponent compete against each other based on holes won, lost, or tied. And there are a lot of decisions can be made in match play that cannot be made in stroke play. Because it's a tournament pretty much within itself. In the regular form of stroke play, Rule 3-3, all players compete with one another based on a total score. That is by adding up the player's total number of strokes, including strokes made by and penalty strokes on each hole on all rounds. Most of the rules apply in both forms of play, but certain rules apply in only one or the other. There are other forms of stroke play that we're not going to really talk about. Rule 21 covers different formats, Stableford, maximum stroke, and par and bogey. GAM does have a few tournaments that are run that way. And if I ever have to work one of those, I have to go back to Rule 21 and brush up on the unique things about that format. So golf is played either by individuals competing on their own or by partners competing together as a side. And rules 1 through 20 focus on individual play. They also apply in competitions involving partners and like foursomes and four ball. And those are covered in rules 22 and 23 and team competitions as modified by Rule 24. So we either have scratch competitions where no handicaps applied, or we have handicap competitions where handicap is applied. In match play, there are specific rules for match play regarding concessions and giving information about number of strokes taken because the player and opponent compete solely against each other on every hole. They can see each other's play and they can protect their own interest. The player wins a hole when he has completed a hole in fewer strokes, including strokes made by and including penalties, fewer strokes than the opponent. Or the player wins the hole when the opponent concedes the hole, or the opponent gets the general penalty, loss of hole, such as a two-stroke penalty, we call it, or any two-stroke penalty is a loss of hole penalty. There is an exception. This is the Jordan Spieth rule, where an opponent's ball in motion needs to be holed. If the opponent's ball in motion needs to be holed to tie the hole and the ball is deliberately deflected or stopped by any person at a time when there is no reasonable chance it can be holed, such as when the ball has rolled past the hole and will not roll back, the result of the hole has been decided and the player wins that hole. Jordan Spieth, remember Jordan Spieth being kind, being polite, one of the Europeans' ball rolled past the hole and Jordan stopped it and hit it back to him. And before this rule was in effect, this exception was in effect, the Jordan Spieth, they lost the hole because of that. Tying a hole is tied, also known as halved. USJ prefers tied. GAM prefers the terminology tied. when the player and opponent complete the hole in the same number of strokes, including strokes made by and penalty strokes, or the player and opponent agree to treat the hole as tied. But it's important to note that this is only allowed after at least one of the players has made a stroke to begin the hole. So a match, you got a player and opponent cannot agree to have a hole without someone starting that hole and skipping it. A player wins the match when a player leads the opponent by more holes than remain to be played. The opponent concedes the match or the opponent is disqualified. In GAM tournaments, when we have match play, we extend tied matches. So if the match is tied after the final hole, the match is extended one hole at a time until there is a winner. And an extended match is a continuation of the same round, not a new round. And you'll notice that is a different situation in stroke play when we have playoffs, when players are competing for qualifying spots and their round has ended after 18 holes, and there is a playoff. That is a new round. It's not considered part of an extension of the old round. But in match play, it's a continuation of the same round. So that you'll see that in different conditions where players are allowed to do things between rounds, and like such as replacing clubs, changing clubs out, or something like that. Players can make changes to things between rounds, but they would not be able to do so in such where it's in a continuation of a match play. Generally, the committee would like to treat the new holes, the extended holes, in the same order as the round, unless problems persist. Say we're at a course where they started public play. We may have to tee the players off in a different order than what was done from the original round. And the terms of the competitions must say that the terms and conditions may say that the match will end in a tie rather than to be extended, and we do not do that. Our terms and conditions say matches are always extended. The result is final when the match becomes final in a way as stated by the committee. It'll be stated on in the local rules when the result is final, when it's recorded on the official scorecard, or it could be official when a referee has been assigned to a match and the referee calls it into the committee. It would be considered official then, perhaps. It'd be determined on the local rules when a match is considered to be final. Players may concede the opponent's next stroke, a hole, or the match. And this can be done anytime before the opponent's next stroke is made. The opponent then has completed the hole with a score that includes the conceded stroke, and the ball may be removed by anyone. The concession made while the opponent's ball is still in motion after the previous stroke applies to the opponent's next stroke, unless the ball is holed, in which case the concession does not matter. The player may concede the opponent's next stroke by deflecting or stopping the opponent's ball in motion only if it is done specifically to concede the next stroke, and only when there is no reasonable chance that the ball can be holed. You can concede a hole anytime before the hole is completed. You can even concede a hole before the players start the hole, which is different from having a hole. You can concede a hole before you even start it, and you can concede a match anytime before the result of the match has been decided. The concession is made only when clearly communicated. This can be done verbally, by any action that clearly shows the player's intent to concede the stroke. The whole is a match, such as a gesture, such as the players walking up and shaking hands, or the player verbally concedes the match. If the opponent lists his or her ball in breach of a rule because of a reasonable misunderstanding that the players statement or action was a concession of the next stroke, a hole, or the match, there is no penalty and the ball must be replaced on its original spot, and which, if not known, must be estimated. There at times, I mean, it does happen where a player might get confused by something the player says. He missed, the player may have said good putt or good something or other at a time, and the player may think that the player has conceded the next stroke, and maybe that wasn't the intent. If that were the case, you'd want to, get those players together and talk that out. And if it wasn't the player's intent to concede the next stroke, the player is not going to be in breach of a penalty by lifting his or her ball. The ball would be replaced on its original spot, and if not known, would be estimated. It's important to note that a concession is final and cannot be declined or withdrawn. And that is a definite statement. Once it's been given, once a concession has been made, it's final. The players must declare handicaps, or they should declare handicaps to each other before the match. Now, GAM provides handicaps in our tournaments where we have handicaps. It's going to be on the player's card. So we generally do not have players declaring the wrong handicap, or there shouldn't be, a player cannot be mistakenly given. The player cannot mistakenly give the wrong handicap, because GAM normally would apply would provide the handicap. So if a mistake is made by GAM on providing a handicap, there's not going to be a penalty to the player on.
Hey, Craig, you have to have a local rule for that. Because what the rule says is that the players are responsible regardless of how the number got there.
I think there's a clarification on that, though, isn't there?
Yeah, but I think I thought it required a local rule.
Is it still a local rule? I don't know.
I'll check and get back to you.
Okay, thanks, John. Because I know that because GAM provides handicaps, I think that would be, okay, check on that, John, thanks. But it's important to declare handicaps. They should declare handicaps. If a player does declare handicap too high, the player would be disqualified. And the player, and once it's declared too high, once the match is started, you can't undo that declaration. GAM generally indicates where the handicap strokes are given by hole. And if a tied match is extended, the handicap strokes are given in the same way on the earlier round. And it's up to each player to know the responsibilities of where the strokes are given. Another thing that's unique about match play is it's important to tell the opponent the correct number of strokes. The opponent at any time during play of a hole or the hole is completed may ask a player for the number of strokes the player has taken, including penalty strokes. The player has taken on that hole. This allows the opponent to decide on how to play the next stroke. So when asked the number of strokes taken, or when given information about that, without being asked, the player must give the right number of strokes taken. A player who fails to respond to the opponent's request is treated as giving the wrong number of strokes, and the player gets the general penalty, loss of hole. So if a player gives the wrong number of strokes to his opponent, and the opponent then makes a stroke, that the player is going to be gets the general penalty, and that the opponent wins the hole because the wrong number of strokes was given to his opponent, his or her opponent.
Unless it's a player's turn to play.
Now, if there are situations where it is not going to be a penalty. You're right, Marv. Now, if the player gives the wrong number of strokes taken after the hole, you have until the player tees off on the next hole to correct that. For the final match, you need to correct that before the match is final. Otherwise, there's going to be a, penalty. Now, there is an exception that if the result of if there's no effect on the result of the hole, for example, the player, say the player loses a hole to a player who got a par 4, and the player gives his stroke as being a 6, or gives the opponent, say he says you got, he gives if he gives the player a wrong number of holes, and it doesn't have any effect, say with handicap applied, or there's no effect on the result of the hole, there's not going to be a penalty. There's also a situation where the player must tell the opponent about the penalty as soon as possible, generally before the player takes the next stroke. But if the player observes the penalty, if the player sees the player taking a penalty stroke and it's apparent to everyone, then you don't need to advise the player of that penalty if it's known or if the player sees you taking a penalty. Now, if there's no penalty, if the player fails, like Mark said, if you fail to tell the opponent your number of strokes taken, and if it's your turn to play, you do not have to give the number of strokes that you've taken until you've completed your swing, until you've played, and then you need to give the player the number of strokes you've taken at that point. Question from Marine: if a putt is conceded, is there a penalty if the player still putts the ball, basically ignoring the occasion concession? No, the putt is conceded. The player can continue to putt. I mean, in match play and in stroke play, players are allowed to practice putting as long as they do not cause slow play. But so what concession cannot be conceded. If the player putts and misses the putt, like I said, the concession is final. The player can still make that putt and practice that putt.
Hey, Craig, in 4-ball, the answer could be different depending upon the situation with your partner.
That's a good point, John. That would be different in team play, in foursome and 4-ball play. Well, it'd be different in not foursome, 4-ball play. Now there are so if not corrected in time, the wrong match score could become the actual match score if not corrected. Now, there is an exception when a player requests a ruling in time. If a player makes a timely request for a ruling, we're going to go over 21B, and it is found out that the opponent either gave the wrong number of strokes taken or failed to tell the player about a penalty, the wrong match score must be corrected. So if it's if a player gives the wrong information and it's not found out until later on, the match will still be adjusted once the player learns of that information. We can go to Rule 21.B. The 21B, Rule 20.1B goes over in details situations that affect the settlement of a claim by when a player makes a claim based on information not known prior. During a round, players in a match may agree how to decide a rules issue. Now, the agreed outcome is conclusive, even if it turns out to have been wrong under the rules, so long as the players do not deliberately agree to ignore any rule or penalty that they knew applied. But if a referee is assigned to a match, the referee must rule on an issue that comes to his or her attention in time, and the players must follow that ruling. Now, when we have a referee assigned to a match, the referee must act on any rules breach that he or she sees or is brought to the referee's attention. Now, in a lot of cases, in some of our tournaments, a referee is not assigned to a match, that you may be an observer for multiple matches, you do not act on any rules breaches you see. The players themselves must act upon that, and they would then they would then settle that issue either amongst themselves, or they may call you in as an observer to help them with the rules issue. So there's a difference between whether you're an assigned referee to a match or you're an observer to several matches. In the absence of a referee, players do not agree to have a doubt. They may request a ruling from a referee at a later point, whenever one's available. They cannot stop play. They cannot play two balls in match play. That's only allowed in stroke play. But they can call a referee in at a point as soon as one's available. A ruling request made before the match is final.
Craig?
The player wants a result referee to decide. They can do that if they make a request for a ruling. Talks about when it is done. A ruling will be given
Craig,
only if the request is made in time, which depends when the player becomes aware of the facts creating the rules issue. So when a player becomes aware of the facts before either player starts the final hole of the match, the player becomes aware of facts, the ruling request must be made before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole. So once you become aware of the facts about a new facts that might cause a claim, a rules violation, the player must make a claim with the referee before either player makes a stroke to begin the next hole. When a player becomes aware of the facts during or completion of the final hole of the match, the ruling request must be made before the result of the match is final. And you can look at we just came from 3-2A. If the player does not make the request in time, a ruling will not be given by the referee or the committee, and the result of the hole will stand even if the rules were applied in the wrong way. This is something the referee probably will not be doing themselves, acting on their own. It's going to probably call in a rules committee member to help with that. But there are examples here about an earlier hole, only if all these apply. The opponent breached a rule by giving the wrong number of strokes taken or failing to tell the player about a penalty. The request is based on facts the player was not aware of before either player made a stroke to begin the final hole played, or before the hole being played, or if between holes, the hole just completed. And after becoming aware of the facts, the player must make a request for a ruling in a time set out as above. So the player can make a request for a ruling, and if a referee is not present, they can continue to play and they can settle the claim after they contact or to get a hold of a referee. A ruling request made after the result of the match is final. When a player makes a request for ruling after the result of the match is final, the committee will only give a ruling in these cases. Generally, it does not happen. There's no time limit on giving such a ruling. Okay, as I said, there's no right to play two balls in match play. And we're going to go back to Rule 3. There are a lot of good interpretations under Rule 3. I encourage you to go to the USGA website and I can get there. Read through the different interpretations. How players must not concede hold, shorten matches, caddies can't complete concessions. Talks about handicapping, when you can declare higher handicap. Gives an example of wrong number of strokes taken after a hole completed and discovered later on. So read through those, go back to the USGA website and go through those. Let's see here. Let me get back to, the heck. Let me get back to full rules here. How do I get? Okay, full rules, back to full rules. We talked about match play. Um, Stroke play we're often very familiar with. How we determine winners, whether it be in rose play or net play. GAM assigns a marker for each player to keep score. Be the markers and the player's responsibility to certify the scoring. And it talks about how certification is done. We require two signatures on the scorecard, both the players and the marker scorecard. We know what happens when you certify a wrong score. So to the marker and the player to mark each hole and to certify that the scores are proper. If a player breaches any of these rules in the scoring on the scorecard, player is going to get disqualified. There is no penalty when a breach is due to the marker failing to carry out his or her responsibilities. I want to talk about, we do have situations where we're in play and stroke play, where a player decides to drop out, he gets injured or decides to has a back injury because of his high score. If you're on that hole, can someone mute themselves, please? If you're called up and you see a player leaving the course, you need to get to that group and you need to go to that player who's leaving the course and to make sure that he is signed off on the holes that he was the marker for a particular player, because those players need to certify the score. That player leaving the course or quitting needs to certify the scores for the holes that player played, and he needs to sign off on those numbers of holes. And then those players that were left need to exchange cards and make sure they're not stuck with the wrong cards. They need to have they mean to switch cards around to establish new markers for themselves for the remaining number of holes that are to be played. So the marker cannot just walk off a course. He needs to certify the holes that he played with that particular player. So if a player returns a scorecard with a higher score than higher score than his actual score, it's going to stand. If a player returns a score lower, the player is disqualified. Under the new rules in 2019, they've added a nice little feature that if the player failed to include a penalty that the player was not aware of and becomes aware of later on, the player is not going to be disqualified, and the player is going to have only the penalty added to his or her score that he would have the penalty strokes had the player known to include them. Those players are to be added in. If the mistake is found before the close of the competition, the committee will revise that player's score for that hole or holes by adding the penalty strokes. The exception does not apply when the penalty is disqualification, or when the player was told that the penalty might apply, or was uncertain whether the penalty applied and did not raise this with the committee before returning the scorecard. Failure to hold out is disqualification. I think everyone knows that. I think that completes Rule 3. I encourage you to go back to the interpretations and read the interpretations for Rule 3. We have 10 minutes. We can probably take a USGA quiz real quickly. If everyone wants to do that.
Hey, Craig, while you're calling that up, here's my follow-up. It's interpretation 3.3B4/2. It says, an authorized association may adopt a policy that alters the provision in 3.3B4. With such a policy in place, that means that if a committee provides a player with a scorecard containing the incorrect handicap and the error is not corrected before the player returns a scorecard, this will be treated as an administrative mistake. It's no penalty and the handicap is corrected.
Okay.
We never make mistakes.
So in that case, if I understand correctly, John, it's a standard clarification. It's not needed in a local rule.
Well, we need to have the policy in place. It says that's because
Okay.
it is, I mean, the rules are pretty clear about the player's responsible that the handicap is correct. So somewhere we need to say inside of a GAM policy that the committee providing the wrong handicap is an administrative error.
Okay, Alex is going to look into that. Take that as an action item to make sure you get that maybe gets added into the tournaments for net tournaments. Thanks, John, for looking that up. Okay, we're going to take a quick rules quiz. We've got 10 questions that are, again, we're going to go with the basic. Encourage a lot of rookie volunteers out there, rookie referees to throw out your best guesses, best estimates of what the correct answer may be. So number 1, which is correct regarding the use of a non-calculating electronic device? We didn't get into rule number 4. We'll have to take that up next week. So which is correct regarding the use of a non-calculating electronic device? I don't even know what that is. It may be used to obtain information about the rules. It may not be used to obtain information about the course. I'm sorry, it may not be used to obtain information about the rules. It may not be used to obtain information about the course. It may be used to review information collected from previous rounds. Which is correct. I think a non-calculating electronic device might be like a rangefinder, or even maybe your smartphone. Any answers thrown out here, A, B, or C?
B.
B,
B?
I like C.
Okay, we'll just go through. We're gonna review these questions this time. We're gonna put B down. Which of the following is considered damage, is considered damaged on the putting green? I think we had this last time, didn't we? Natural wear of the hole is damage, wall marks, shoe damage, and scrapes considered equipment caused by equipment of the flagstick or aeration holes or grooves from vertical mowing. Which of the following is considered as damage?
B.
B, okay. Number 3, on the putting green, a player picks up an acorn on his or her line of play that was slightly pushed into the surface by another player's shoe in his or her stepping on this acorn. The player also repairs the depression left by the acorn. What is the ruling? The player was not allowed to remove the acorn and repair the depression. The player was allowed to remove the acorn and repair the depression. The player was allowed to remove the acorn, but not to repair the depression.
B.
B.
B? Okay. Which of the following is correct regarding the ball line in 2 parts of the course? If part of the ball is in both a penalty area and a bunker, it is treated as lying in the bunker. If part of the ball is in both the general area and one of the specific areas of the course, it is treated as lying in that specific area of the course. If part of the ball is lying in both a bunker and a putting green, it is treated as lying on the putting green.
B,
B.
B? I'm glad we covered that so thoroughly. Which is incorrect regarding loose impediments. Worms and ants that can be removed with ease are loose impediments. Loose impediments include the material removed from holes made by insects, a dead bird in a penalty area, near the player's ball in the same penalty area, will not be removed without penalty. Was that B, Chris?
C,
D.
B.
I'm saying, am I hearing B or C?
which is incorrect.
Which is incorrect.
C,
C?
Yeah.
B.
Okay, in stroke play, after all players have started a hole, the ball furthest from the hole must be played first.
False.
False. In stroke play, when required to drop a ball in the relief under a rule, a player placed the ball in the relief area and played it. What is the ruling?
C.
C.
C?
C.
D.
Played from the wrong place.
In stroke play, a player returns his or her scorecard with a total score that is incorrect, but with a score missing for one hole.
No, it says correct.
It says correct.
I'm sorry, what?
You read it wrong.
Correct.
They're saying that the question says is correct.
It is
Did I say
correct.
incorrect?
Yeah, you
I'm
said-
sorry, in stroke play, a player returns his or her scorecard with a total score that is correct, but with a score missing for one hole. What is the ruling?
C,
C.
DQ.
D.
In number nine, in stroke play, two players strike their balls into the same area of high grass. Two balls are found, but because there are no identifying marks on either ball, neither of the players can identify a ball as his or hers. What is the ruling? There is no penalty and each must choose which of the balls to play based on lot. Each player gets a penalty of stroke and distance because both balls are lost. Each player
D.
must get a one-stroke penalty for not putting an identifying mark on his or her ball and must choose which ball to play based on lot.
B,
10, because a player's ball lies in a bunker and there is no nearest point of complete relief from temporary water, the player will use the point of maximum available relief, which is incorrect about this point. It is the nearest point to where the ball came to rest, but not near the hole, where the condition least interferes with the stroke the player would have made from the ball's original spot if the condition did not exist. The point where the ball will be in shallower water than where the player will stand, or where the player's intended swing will be affected less than a stance. C, it may be based on the line of play where the ball will need to go through the shallowest of or shortest stretch of temporary water.
A,
A.
A.
It's gotta be A.
Got to be A, right? Okay, let's submit this. Okay, we got only 8 correct. Let's go over each one about the course. Any questions on number one? The correct answer, the answer was regarding the use of a non-calculating electronic device. It may be used, which is correct. We answered it may not be used to obtain information about the course. So it may be, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what GPS.
Yeah,
have.
you couldn't have GPS if that were true.
That's what GPSs do. They have how far it is to penalty areas, how far it is to the hole. Okay, the correct answer is it may be used to review information collected from previous rounds. So in other words, you may, as long as you have done it beforehand, you may use it to review information collected from a previous round. You cannot, I don't think you can also play videos that you, and we'll get that into section 4 about players' equipment. But if you bring videos of like video aids for your, help you play. If you've done that before you come to the course, you're entitled to play those videos. Okay, any questions on number 2? We got this one correct about damage to the putting green. Okay, damages, ball marks, etc. Any questions on number 3? A player picking up an acorn. This was a change in 2019. Before, you weren't allowed to pick out anything embedded, deep, solidly embedded in the putting green and repair it. Nowadays you can. No questions on 3. How about, anybody have any questions about what number 4 regarding the ball line in 2 parts of the course? Okay, it's always, if the ball lies in 2 parts of the course, general and specific, it's always treated as lying in that specific area of the course. Any questions on number 4 regarding loose impediments? A dead bird is a loose impediment, so it can, not under today's rules, players may move loose impediments in penalty areas these days. Any questions on that? Look up, you can review the definition of loose impediment. In stroke play, all players that start at a hole, the ball farthest in the hole must be played first. We definitely, that's not a rule. There's no rule about stroke play, who has to play, order of play. We definitely don't want to do that in cases where we've got a player going through a ruling, trying to find relief. In that case, the referee would definitely want those players closer to the green to play further up and even maybe hole out until we get that relief situation settled. Number 7, in stroke play, when required to drop a ball in the relief area, a player placed the ball in the relief area and played it. That is, I can't say it's always going to be the case, but a player's going to get the general penalty for playing from a wrong place. So I know the USGA has a question on some of their quizzes sometimes where if a player places the ball on, let me see, I better take that back. It's always going to be probably playing from the wrong place. So the player will always get the general penalty. Number 9, we got correct. The players are not responsible for adding up their score. That's always done by a committee member. I mean, sometimes they will do that, but we disregard it. It needs to always be verified by a committee member at the scoring area. So if a player does not validate his or her scores are complete for every hole, that's going to be a disqualification penalty. And a person at the scoring area should make sure that the player has gone over the scorecard before they leave the scoring area to make sure all the scores are in each hole. That would not be a good situation. In stroke play, 2 players strike their balls into the same area of high grass. Okay, each player is going to get a lost ball. In that case, those balls are lost, and the players must. Now, I will say this: that if we've had junior tournaments where we've got young juniors out there, and you've got 2 players playing the same ball and they didn't know about it, and they're in the same area, and it's say they're both in the fairway right next to each other.
That's correct.
We have waived that penalty for juniors that are like young. We tell them, this is a learning experience. Tells you how you instruct them how they should have marked their ball in a unique fashion, so that they don't ever have it happen. This doesn't ever happen to them again. Number 10, we got incorrect. When a player's ball lies in a bunker and there is no nearest point of complete relief from temporary water, the player will use a point of maximum available relief, which is incorrect. Okay, we said incorrect. We answered it's the nearest point where the ball comes to rest.
That's correct.
Not near the hole.
Yeah.
So that is, I think we misunderstood that. Maybe we thought it was we were answering the correct answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we assumed we were answering the correct answer, not the incorrect answer. Because the incorrect response is it may be based on line of play where the ball will need to go through the shallowest or shortest stretch of temporary water. And again, a good definition to look at is point of maximum available relief. To go through that if you have any questions on how that works.
Good job today, Craig.
Okay, our time is up. We've gone over by 5 minutes. I want to thank you for coming today. We'll be back next Wednesday. We'll resume with Rule 4 and try to get through 5 and 6 to get back on schedule. Review those rules ahead of time. Have your questions ready. Other rookie volunteers out there, take the time to go up to the USU website and go take the interactive quiz result, take your interactive quizzes. If you feel bold, you want to bump up your level of intensity of the question, you can go back and take the next level up, which is, what is the next level up? What does it say? You can intermediate. You can choose intermediate. You can take it. You want to spend longer time on a computer, you can choose 10, 18, or 25 questions. Good luck to everyone. Again, thanks for being here. See you all back here next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
Question?
Greg.
Thank you.